If the end or breakdown of a marriage wasn't the end for you or your family, but the beginning of a different kind of healing you never thought would be possible? What if the rubble of a relationship that's been ruined could become the raw materials for rebuilding a self that's deeper, stronger, kinder, and even more courageous than the one who entered into that relationship? Divorce is a way of convincing people that they're broken, irreparably broken, ruined, or disqualified from joy. But maybe that's the biggest lie that they might ever believe if you're in that situation. Today we're stepping right into the middle of that lie. We're also stepping into the ache, the questions, the grief, the pain of divorce, but also the hidden hope that lies within it. That hope of understanding that you can move through divorce and not just survive, but you can thrive on the other side. Because there's a difference between moving out of a marriage and actually moving into the real self that you are. My guest today refuses to let people settle for a story that ends this way, that divorce is the end for them and their story. He's on a mission to help them find wholeness, healing, and a reclaimed identity on the other side of that event. He's walked this road, he's guided others down it, and he brings a perspective that's honest, compassionate, and wonderfully hopeful. Hey, my friends, welcome back to the Uncommodified podcast. I'm Tim Windsor, and today my guest on the show is Bill Koontz. Bill, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Tim. It's a delight to be here. I've been looking
it's going to be a lot of fun. Really, I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I'll explain how we met as we get through it. But a bit about Bill for you if you're listening in. Bill has an anniversary that he's never celebrated. That's the day his marriage ended. But instead of letting that moment define and destroy him, he turned it into a mission. In 1990, he founded Divorce and Beyond, an organization that's provided hope and a pathway to healthy recovery to thousands of adults and hundreds of children dealing with divorces, anxieties, and fears. Bill's personal experience navigating divorce still fuels his work today. Bill and his team offer people a grounded, compassionate, and deeply practical roadmap for moving forward, not just recovering, but rebuilding with purpose, confidence, and a renewed sense of self. I think it's time for a drink, my friend, because this is an uncommodified podcast. So now that we're into a deep subject, I definitely need a drink, so we're going to do that.
I have mine housed in a Yeti.
I love it. What do you got in there?
I like my hot stuff hot and my cold stuff cold.
I love it. What do you got in that Yeti, Bill?
I got a Michelob.
Oh, you got a Michelob. That's good beer. I'm going to drink an IPA, a single-hopped IPA from a microbrewery. I got to be careful. Last time I did this when I was podcasting, it went all over the place. So I gotta that did it again. Oh my gosh. Hold on here, Bill. I got beer all over me. It's all over my arm.
You're not only drinking it, you're wearing it, huh?
I don't know why that happened, but it's everywhere in my studio. Hold on a second here. Okay. Take two.
All right.
There you go, Bill. I'm going to drink my beer, but I got it all over me. Good thing we just did
next
this
time
live.
you put it in a Yeti?
No, I should have put it in a Yeti.
Then.
You know what, Bill? I'm not as wise as you. I should have put it in a Yeti because it's all over my pants now. But that's all good. That's fine. You know, life is a little messy sometimes, and so is the subject matter that we're going to be talking about tonight.
Yep.
So, Bill, really appreciate connecting with you. Full disclosure for you if you're listening in, my connection to Bill is actually through a good friend of mine, Barry Long, who I had on the podcast recently. If you didn't listen to that episode that I had with Barry, you should listen to it. It's a great conversation about discovering new ways of living outside of the safety of the pool and into the ocean. Great conversation. If you didn't listen to it, you should. But Barry introduced Bill and I, and it was a great conversation, and I wanted to have it with all of you listeners and with Bill. So, Bill, we're going to explore this subject about divorce and getting on the other side of it and recovering and finding wholeness. It's a big subject. It's a difficult subject. And again, if you're listening in, just a bit of a warning, you know, for some of you, this might trigger some really difficult feelings, maybe where you are, where you might be, or where you have been. So please listen with a gracious intent to yourself as you listen in, because it's going to be, I think, a little bit of a challenging conversation. Yeah. So let's start it this way, Bill. Tell us a little bit about your journey, and also as we move through this, you know, why do you think we all need to be maybe a little bit more compassionate, find a little more compassionate viewpoint upon which to look at this subject and this issue in our lives and in our society? But what's your journey, Bill?
Yeah. So my journey starts at age 11. That's not when I got married. That's when my parents got divorced.
Okay.
And after that, it became very, as I reflected back on it, because at the time of 11, I didn't really realize these things. But when I reflected back on that in my later years, I realized that other people began to regard us as different.
Mm-hmm.
This was in the 60s, so,
Yeah.
it dates me. But it was a time when divorces were even less common than they are now.
Yeah.
And so a single parent, we lived on a minor income. I took up a paper route job when I was 12 to help support the family. And I just felt that people began to look at me and us differently. I was now a kid who was kind of damaged and probably not going to succeed. A kid who is now an underdog. So I worked through all that. Not all that. We never do, right?
Yeah.
But I began to work through that stuff. And I made a determination when I got married that would never happen to me. I would never put my kids through that, assuming I would have kids. And I did. So I got married. I was 23 when I got married, and my wife was 22. She just graduated from college. And soon after our vows were taken, we began to have problems. And I'm not going to go into all the detail of that unless you lead me to that direction. But we struggled for about 11 years. And then we went to counseling, we read stuff, we went on retreats, we dated, we vacationed, we did the things that you would normally think could continue to breathe life into a marriage relationship, but it didn't. In the end, it did not. And so after 12 years, she filed for divorce, and that turned out to be the most traumatic experience of my life. I was actually a pastor at the time. And so in the space of 3 months, I lost my marriage, lost my career job. And I did it because I resigned. I didn't feel like I was capable of leading in that regard any longer. And then thirdly, I lost my relation with my kids for a long time. And it was very painful. Unfortunately, about 3 weeks after she filed for divorce, she also made accusations of me that were completely unfounded, but very derogatory, especially in relationship to my kids and other people. And so my kids swallowed it, hook, line, and sinker. They were 4 and 8 at the time. And following that, we went into about a 15-year period where they believed everything their mom had told them, and I was not allowed. I was not given room. It's not that I wasn't allowed. I wasn't given the room to be able to convey to them my side of the story.
Wow.
So
Phew.
at that point, about 15 years later, my son, who was 8 at the time, 23, 15 years later, went through his divorce. He got married between his sophomore and junior in college. I wasn't invited to his high school graduation. I wasn't invited to his wedding. There was a lot of pain in there for both of us. But after he got divorced, it kind of opened his eyes. Like, wow, this is not the experience that I had wanted in my marriage. And gosh, I wonder, he started to reflect about his mom and dad, myself, our marriage, and began to take a little bit different view. And so I came out one weekend. I flew out to Connecticut where he was living, spent the weekend with him in his apartment, and we talked for the first time about the circumstances that led up to our divorce. And because I was a youth and young adult pastor at church, but because I was part of the church felt a need to do its own investigation into the allegations that my ex-wife had leveled at me. And the church did interviews. They did their own study. They concluded that there was no basis to the allegations. So we reviewed those things. And he said, Dad, this has been really, really helpful. And a month later, he called me. He said, Dad, I've concluded that you're innocent of those things that Mom had told me all these years about you. And so that then began a next 20-year journey now of healing and reconciliation between of it. We're a wonderful father and son relationship. So that's a bit about my journey. And the pain of my divorce, about 3 years after the divorce, came to light for Barry. Barry and I were good friends, played racquetball together every other week. And one week he mentioned to me, he said, "Hey, Bill, I know some people who are going through a divorce. It's really been hard. Would you mind just sitting down with them and talking with them about what worked for you, what didn't work for you, and kind of your journey?" And I said, "Hell no." I was not in any place at that point to be able to do that. He asked me again a year later, and I said, let me think about that. Let me pray about that. So I did, and I sat down with I think it was about 6 couples. Well, 6 not couples, 6 individuals representing 6 couples.
Yeah.
And that became the beginning of what's now become Divorce and Beyond. And we've had, as you said, over 5,000 people go through it now, and hundreds of kids, and it just birthed a sense of calling in me, a sense of deep purpose about how do we help people who have gone through a divorce recover, heal, and grow. And that's why the title of the book is Divorce and Beyond.
Yeah. Yeah, and listen, so again, if you're listening in, as you hear Bill's story, and we'll talk about our stories tonight, you might have a story that you're thinking about too. And again, I would encourage you that, you don't know where you are in the story. I don't know what chapter you are, but, you might have found great wholeness on the other side of divorce, or in the midst of it, or you may still be looking for it. But I'd encourage you to do the thinking that you need to do as a result of this conversation. Maybe find Bill's book. It's a great book, and we'll talk later about how you might connect with Bill and his organization if that was something that could work for you as well. But thanks also just for your deep honesty and communication. I do have a question as you've talked about this, and again, listeners, that I don't pre-rehearse my conversations. It's just not the way we do that. We have an idea that we're going to explore, and we explore it together. And so I often say to my guests when I send them an email is the conversation we're supposed to have will find us along the way. It's sort of the way I look at these things. So I do have a question, because you've referenced that you came from a faith tradition. You were a pastor in a church. This event happens. So I'm interested to know, so if you look at a person who maybe is part of a faith community, regardless of that faith community, a part of a faith community, or somebody who isn't, is the impact of divorce the same? Or is there special circumstances that come to bear when you're part of a community that might have either a really positive way of framing a very negative experience, or frankly, maybe more often not, a bit of a more negative perspective on that? Does that make it harder for people, in your experience, your own experience, but also the people that you've connected with over the years? Is it harder for them because of the weight that it puts on their soul because of their life perspective and their sense of faith?
Yeah. I'd start by saying that there's more similarities than there are differences. The breakdown of a marriage is painful regardless of whether you entered into it through a spiritual covenant and faith perspective. Obviously, one of the things that makes that particularly troublesome is the fact that you have, from a faith perspective, you've entered into a covenant before God. And so when you fail in the midst of that covenant, and that covenant is broken, there is an additional layer of guilt and shame that people often need to deal with. And that's true in terms of if they're active in a faith community, that faith community may be a wonderfully grace-oriented, supportive, we want to help you heal kind of community. More often than not, it's not that. And so then that becomes even a deeper sense, or adds to the sense of guilt and shame that you feel. And most people that we work with who have been in the church leave the church because of their divorce, because they feel like they got a big scarlet D on their forehead that everybody else sees, and they feel a sense of unworthiness, a sense of critical spirit, a sense of you failed, and they can't deal with it. They don't want to, and so they leave. That's their way of dealing with it, is to leave. And many times they'll find another church,
Right.
where they can feel like they can start over, but sometimes not. Sometimes that just is the straw that breaks the camel's back for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can appreciate that, and I can see that. Obviously, divorce is difficult, regardless of whether you come from a faith tradition or not, because that fracturing is a deep wound.
Yes.
But as you said, there's another layer of complexity when a person has a religious conviction around this experience. That becomes obviously even more difficult for people. So I'm interested, as you start understanding that maybe you have a calling into a community of people that you can identify with because of your experience. You have some understanding and some things you learn, some lessons you learn, and some mechanisms you learn through the process. You now start sharing these with people. You get this sense of calling. At what point do you start to sort of get that sense that, maybe the rest of my life's work in some ways is going to be tucked into this community of people that needs a gracious intention expressed towards them?
Yeah. Wow. If I can, I'd like to go back to your other question and kind of finish that.
Yeah.
I'd like to. I started by saying that there's more similarities than there are differences.
Yes.
And I'd like to highlight those similarities because those will transfer to every single person in your audience who's been through a divorce, or people who care for somebody who's been through a divorce.
Yep.
Like how do I understand what they're going through? So I mentioned the breaking of covenant as being one of those that's kind of unique to the religious faith community.
Yeah.
But the two that are common with all, and that is that sense of loss of companionship. When you marry somebody, and Tim, I talked to you a little bit. I know you've been married for 40 years. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's almost 40 years. I was a child groom.
Yeah, I can tell.
Yeah.
Your wife has kept you looking young.
Well, I don't know about that, but she's definitely kept me.
Yeah. So when you marry someone, you marry them almost always because this person has become your very best friend, your closest ally, the person who you have borne your heart to, the person who knows more about you than anybody else. And that we call that companionship in the book.
Yeah.
And the companionship that you experience in marriage is unlike any other companionship in life. And so when that begins to be violated, when that companionship begins to break down, you feel terribly exposed. The things that you would have hoped would have never been said about you may have been said now. The secrets that only your spouse knew may now be secrets to others. You may feel like you've been the person you married has rejected you, has no longer found you to be worth being a friend. And it goes both ways. It doesn't matter who's filed and who hasn't filed. I mean, those are all kind of gymnastics, legal gymnastics. But what we want to help people to focus on is what's going on inside of each person who goes through this. And I found that some people just rather live in denial. And so they try to treat their hurt in other ways than actually dealing with it, acknowledging it, working with it, healing it, moving on from it. You know, they medicate it. They do all kinds of stuff to try to just keep it tucked away nice and neatly where they don't have to look at it anymore.
Yeah.
So one of them is companionship. The other one is consummation. You know, sex is an important part of any marriage. The sex drive is kind of is always a part of what brings two people together. And when those sexual ties have been broken, maybe while you've been married, that is extremely painful. It feels like you have been, you know, when you are in marriage and you are enjoying one another's physical intimacy, you're completely naked with one another. You're completely naked physically, emotionally, mentally, and the rush of the experience, the hormonal part of that experience, the sense of meaningfulness and joy and satisfaction, I mean, all of that. When that breaks down, oh my gosh. That's why we say there are reasons why divorce is so hard. And they start with, this is what marriage is about. It's about deep companionship. It's about intimate consummation. And when those things are no longer, that's why divorce is hard.
Yeah, and that's very powerful, and that's just very true. So people encounter this moment of tremendous difficulty, and whether they instigated the decision or they're just enduring the decision. Now they want to figure out how to walk forward. Obviously, this is where you and your team have lots of experience and expertise. So how do people start walking forward and finding a new sense of wholeness, either in themselves in a new season of singleness, and or into, how do they find themselves then into another trusting, committed relationship?
Yeah.
Which I imagine has to be just really difficult. I have to, to be very honest, my wife and I have very honest conversations about life and about lots of different things. And, we've talked about some of these things and talked through them, even though, we've never experienced this. But I'm not sure I would ever get married again, to be honest. I don't know I don't know what I would do, but I don't know how I could do it. And so how do others, and how do you equip others to find wholeness somehow in themselves and then move into a season where they can walk into any relationship with a sense of not being so wounded that they can't do it?
Yeah. That's a great question, and it's a very complicated question because divorce is different for every single marriage. I compare it to a car wreck. No two car wrecks are alike.
Yeah.
You know, some people walk away from their car wrecks with minor injuries. Some people end up in ICUs and emergency rooms and barely survive, and everywhere in between. So the journey to recovery and growth, healing and growth, is a bit different for every single person because their divorce has been different, because they're a unique individual in this broken place. But there are some very common themes, and those are the ones that we try to unpack for people. The first one is that people have to come out of denial. When you are dealing with that level of pain and hurt, and really I call it trauma, because for me, I think I may have mentioned it was the most traumatic experience of my life. Which, by the way, because I'll just a little P.S. asterisk, if you walk through healing and growth well, it prepares you for future trauma. It really does. And I can talk about that later. But so the first step is to really come out of denial. And we can't do that on our own. I don't know if you're familiar with the Johari window, but it talks about the fact that, you know, there's this part of us that's known to us and known to others. Part of us is just known to others. Part of us is known to us. And others do have insights into who we are and what we're struggling with, people that know us well. And they can be very valuable at helping us identify things that we don't want to see. We coach every single person. It doesn't matter if your spouse committed some act that blew the marriage up. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you come to terms with how did it break you? What's the brokenness you brought into the marriage? Because we all do. And how did you contribute to the breakdown? Sure, you can blame, you know, your spouse, but that's simply a form of denial. Blaming is a form of denial. It's like, it's your responsibility, it's not mine. And so we try to coach people how to come out of denial. And that happens a lot as we begin. We do a seminar, a one-day seminar. We have people around tables, and they begin to talk between the presentations. And we try to help them just slowly begin to emerge out of this cocoon that a lot of people put themselves in, spin around themselves to protect themselves. And then that's followed by our 13-week support groups. And in those support groups, oh my gosh, people begin to really let it down. And they hear other people's stories, and it begins to bring insights into their own lives. And as they watch the videos that are part of our recovery groups, as they read, they begin to understand a whole lot more who they are in an uncommodified way, who they are, and what they brought to the marriage that led to that and contributed to the marriage not working. And so coming out of denial is huge. The second thing is that most everybody, without exception, everybody that comes through divorce is extremely angry. And people deal with anger in all kinds of different ways. Some people stuff it, some people explode it, some people, you know. And some people are really good at hiding their anger. But that just will make you sick. So we try to coach people about how to deal with their anger. First of all, acknowledge it. You know, let it out. Let other people know about it. And then begin to own it. Begin to understand that it's your anger. Nobody made you angry. You're angry for reasons, but it's not because somebody else made you angry. So helping people deal with anger. And then deal with depression. Depression is a very common outcome of divorce because of all the reasons we've already talked about.
Yeah.
And, you know, depression comes in a couple of different forms. One, you blame yourself, and so you just put yourself down. You put yourself down. You're your own worst critic, your divorce has highlighted all the bad things that you ever thought about yourself, and then some. You may have other people feeding into that as well. So depression is a very common result of divorce, and we again try to help people acknowledge that. What are the sources of it? How do you begin? What are strategies to move through depression? And you got to, sometimes it's important to get some medication to help. And some people have resistance to that. It's like, no, I don't want it. Hey, if it takes something like that to help you out of the pit of depression, that's a way, way better, that's going to produce way better results than if you simply wallow in it. So, and then there's a whole bunch, there's like 6 more steps that are on the recovery side. But those are the ones that we try to help people initially deal with, recognize, deal with it, begin to move through it, whether it's a counseling situation, a support group situation, result of what you're reading, whatever. But those are so important steps.
Well, so appreciate you sharing that and highlighting those things. One thing I found interesting is the role of blame, or how blame shows up within this conversation, where blame of others and blame of ourselves is equally as unhelpful. And that's kind of interesting, because this isn't about blaming one or blaming another. It's actually understanding that blaming ourselves or blaming someone else doesn't lead us forward, actually.
Right.
We become stuck in that. We either become so focused on punishing ourselves or punishing someone else that it's very hard to move forward into a positive future while you're still tethered to the past in punishing yourself or others. So that is an interesting part of what I hear you saying in this, and it's just really wise. And I also appreciate, it's wise and it's measured. I mean, even what you said, if what you need is, you can medicate yourself in an unhealthy way, but if you need something to help you, if you get into that depressed place, I just really appreciate the just the wise understanding and counsel that's there. Because again, I think sometimes it's so easy for us to polarize or think, well, if that happens, then I've lost. If I have to take something, I've lost.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the measured wisdom, and clearly that's come through your own experience and through the experience that you've had in fulfilling this calling that you have towards this group of people that you obviously identify with and can understand, because you've walked in that valley, and you have the scars to prove it, and it's really, really wonderful to hear how that all comes together. I am interested in this, and this could be totally erroneous. And by the way, if it is, I'd like you to tell me it was erroneous.
Can I break in there a minute?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I want to add one more thought to what you just said.
Yeah, go ahead.
And that is that depression sometimes leads people to suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
And that is not uncommon. One of the things I would want your listeners to hear is that if you are in a place where you're committing or you're seriously thinking about suicide, you are not alone. That is not an uncommon result of coming through a devastating, life-changing experience. Wow. And in this case, the context we're talking about is divorce. So again, we try to take. We had one guy came to our seminar on Friday. He had signed up. We had sent a little reminder, and he had decided he wasn't going to go, even though he'd signed up. In fact, he's planning on ending his life that night.
Wow.
Friday night. He got the reminder card that very day, and it was just enough of an encouragement that he went to the seminar, and he's still alive today.
Wow.
And so I say that again just to say, hey, there's no shame in feeling so devastated that you're thinking your life is just needs to come to an end. Instead, acknowledge it. Bring it out into the open with somebody you really deeply trust, and someone who you think can help you begin to find your way out. We have suicide hotlines now. So anyway, I just wanted to add that little piece to.
No, Bill, thanks for doing that, and I mean, I just really appreciate that. And let me go in a different direction for a
Sure.
second because
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave what I was thinking over here for now. If it needs to come back, it will. But what I really love about what you just said is we started this conversation and I asked the question, is there a difference in the experience between maybe people who come from a religious or faith tradition or not? And you said there's more similarities and difference, but one of the difference might be an added level of shame and guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're also talking about how shame comes back into this for people, and frankly, it can become the thing that breaks their back.
Yes.
And it can lead them to a place where they feel like they can't move forward. There's no moving forward for them. There's no recovery. And so they become hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty clear to me that you're a purveyor of hope. But you're also a wonderful realist. And you're also a person who clearly is not wanting to heap shame on people.
Mm.
And what I appreciate about you is that, again, you come from that faith tradition, and obviously I know that you still practice in those things. And unfortunately, a lot of people who are in those faith tradition, they're pretty good at dealing out shame.
Mm-hmm.
And so the most wonderful thing for me, partly in this conversation, is that you are a person who understands the evilness that shame actually perpetrates on another individual.
Mm-hmm.
And your journey has taken you from a place of potentially maybe in your past a place of judgment often that we come from, but we come to a place of grace, and we've come to a place where we are not going to be the shamer anymore. And so that's, to me, is part of this, the wonderful part of this. And I love that because I do think that we can shame people unintentionally.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can shame them on purpose. You talked about your own experience. You talked a little bit about, your experience as a child. I have a similar background, and my parents were divorced when I was quite young, and I will say that sense of shame is real and powerful.
Mm.
I felt that as a kid. When my parents were divorced, my mom took a group of us, and we grew up in government housing and didn't have a lot of money, and we would go to the grocery store at times, and her check would be rejected because it was government housing, and the shame that went at that. And so, there's a constant shaming that happens along the way to people. And so when we can release people from shame, that is there. I don't know if there's a greater gift.
Yeah.
Getting the book is great. Going to a seminar is amazing. Getting some tips is awesome. Removing shame is transformative.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I just want to really park on that again. If you're listening in and you feel that shame, if you've gone through this experience, whether you're from a faith tradition or not, hey, I think Bill was telling you, that shame isn't something you need to bear.
Mm-hmm.
And get yourself in a place where you can get relief from that, because that's the stuff that will kill you, whether it does physically or whether it does emotionally or whether it does psychologically. That shame is impressively evil.
Yes, it is.
So Bill, I appreciate just the wonderful graciousness and hopefulness that is in this conversation for people. So I'm going to ask you a question that I want to sort of move into, and then we'll sort of bring the conversation into a landing. But so when you encounter a person and you see them transformed over time, so when you and your group get the chance to walk aside another human who's in this situation, and you get an opportunity to help lift their head up so they can start seeing the future and they can move into the future, what does that feel like at the end of the day? I'm interested. Like, what does that feel like for you and your team? And how does that connect to your story?
Yeah. That's good. And as another little side note on shame, if we have time to come back to that, I would like to share with your listeners kind of a really practical 5-step piece that can help them in their journey out of shame.
That we're gonna go there for sure.
Okay, so,
Love it.
but back to your question. Divorce recovery work, leadership, is really hard. I from an emotional perspective, I'm not sure there's a harder place you can walk into than another person's deeply shaped trauma in their own lives. When I walk into our seminar room, there can be anywhere from, we've had as many as 120. When I walk into that room, I can feel it. There's just like a cloud, a thick cloud, oppressive cloud that's in the room at the beginning of the day. You walk in and you can feel it. When our seminar concludes, there is no cloud. People, for the first time maybe in weeks or even months, have laughed. They have been served. They have been treated with dignity. They have eaten good food. They've seen some really good video and PowerPoint stuff, and they've heard from a variety of people who have walked through the kind of thing they're experiencing. And at the end of that seminar, we always take a feedback sheet. And oh my gosh, that's why I'm still doing this. That's why I'm still doing this. It's hard. It's extremely hard. It's the hardest thing I do. But it's also, because of that, it's even more so rewarding and meaningful to see the kind of impact we're making on people's lives. One who was thinking about committing suicide.
Wow. What a powerful image regarding just the power of that dark oppressiveness that gets on people, and how you the wonder for you is seeing that removed from them. Which and I would say shame is a little bit like a cloak. It can get on you. So that brings us back, and I'm going to get you to share this, and then we'll make sure that people know how they can connect with you and your team.
Sure.
We'll finish up, but so share with my listeners, for their benefit and maybe for the benefit of somebody in their life, what are some of these steps that can help lead a person out of this dark shame that gets on them some days?
Yeah. So we have devised what's called a 5-step. We call it the S method, because each of the key words starts with the letter S. And the first S is to spot. To spot the shaming thoughts that come at you or that come from within you. To spot them, to begin to identify those thoughts. The second thing is to make a decision and say, I am going to stop that process. That mental process, I realize, has no value. It only degrades me. And I'm going to stop that. I'm going to make a decision to stop thinking that way, and I want to think a different way. The third S is to stand. And sometimes that's to physically stand. But it's basically making a commitment of saying, I am going to stand against those thoughts. I am going to move forward into a different direction. And the fourth S then is substitute. Substitute those thoughts with thoughts that are true about you. And if you have trouble coming up with them, then make a list from other people, what they tell you. Say, what's true about me? Who am I? What's true about me? What do you know about me? What are the characteristics about me that are worthwhile? And make a list, and then substitute, those shaming thoughts with what is true. Substitute. And then the fifth one is to seek. If you're just stuck, you're just having trouble digging out of the muck of being able to think differently, then seek some help. And that help might be a friend, call a friend. It could be a counselor, beginning a counseling relationship. It could be seeking out a group. It could be, any number of strategies to seek help outside of myself so that I can begin to move forward.
Wow. So I love it. It's practical, it's actionable, it's wise. And so again, if you're listening in, you might want to pause. You might want to press the rewind button. Write those things down if you haven't, and ask yourself: do I need to activate these things for myself, or do I need to activate these for others? But really wise counsel, Bill, and I really appreciate it. Really wise.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Tim. Again, it's just stuff that we've discovered over 30 years and read and figured out what works and what doesn't work.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, also, Bill, I just really appreciate your, you have this wonderful humility about the way that you approach this subject. And again, I think that's really important. I mean, there is text within the sacred writings that I think about right now. And again, some people in my who listen might resonate with this, and some people, they won't know this text. But I think the truth is still applicable. There's the verse that says that God encourages us, and God themselves desires to give grace to the humble and potentially law to the proud. Mm-hmm. And I guess what I see in that, in the discussion, is I think sometimes when people get into these places of deep trauma, that if we're not careful, whether we're religious or not, we're ending up giving the law to the humble, and we're destroying them.
Yeah.
But when we give grace to the humble, it causes them to be released in such a powerful way that they can find wholeness and freedom. And so your graciousness in your communication, in your compassion for people, in your gracious acceptance of where they are, who they are, based on your own experience, and for a man who was treated so ungraciously, you obviously have learned grace from that experience, and for the benefit also of others, which I just really find a really wonderful sort of thread in this conversation, Bill. And I just want to acknowledge and say that I deeply appreciate that. So, Bill, let's just say that somebody needed to find you. I need to find you or your group. What's the best way for them to get connected with you? Find your book, maybe find your seminars, get connected with you guys. What's the best way for that to happen?
Well, probably the best way would be to go to our website,
Okay.
divorceandbeyond.org.
Okay.
There you'll find all of our resources, the seminars, the support groups. You'll find the book. And I like to show the book because it doesn't look like a divorce recovery book.
No.
Right? I mean, it is full of color.
Yeah.
It focuses you on, sure, the reality of divorce, but it also focuses you on the beyond. Yeah. What's beyond the bridge. Yeah. So anyway, that's our book. It just came out in August. It's available at all the major booksellers in all the formats, Audible, all that stuff. So e-versions. So that's the best way. And if you go on the website, if you want to email us, there's an email address there, info@divorceandbeyond.org, that you can use. So that's how people can get in touch with us.
Okay, appreciate that. So, as listeners, I tend to bulk record in advance and then we release. So when you're listening to this conversation, this conversation, you're going to be listening to it. If you're listening to it the day it releases, it's early January 2026. You might be listening to it some other time in the future after that. But if you are listening at the beginning of January, there's a reason why when Bill and I chatted I made a decision based on something Bill said to me, that I asked my producer to make sure that this would get released at the beginning of January 2026. And so I really want to end with this, Bill, because you shared something with me about that time of the year. I'd like you to share that with my listeners, but I also would like you, I'm going to give you an opportunity, and you can end this podcast today on this note. I'd like you to speak to people who might be sitting in their car or in their living room or in a hotel room or wherever they are listening to this podcast, and they're contemplating some things in their life.
Yeah.
So what is it about the beginning of January that is really important for people to understand?
Well, first of all, if you are, wherever you are sitting right now, I want to say to you that the most powerful gift you can give yourself and that you can give to everyone else around you, your kids, your ex-spouse or soon-to-be ex-spouse, is the gift of forgiveness. I found that people who are willing to forgive themselves receive God's forgiveness, who are willing to forgive their ex, who are willing to forgive other people who are involved. Those are the people that discover the secret of healing and moving forward. They find a way to release themselves from the bondage, from the prison of unforgiveness and bitterness and resentment and blame, all those things we've talked about. So January is important because we hold a seminar every January. This year it's going to be January 24th. And the reason for that is because we found that there are 2 dates in the year where divorces are filed most frequently. One of them is January and the other is June. January because spouses agree together generally if they're getting divorced. Okay, let's just get through the holidays. Let's get through Thanksgiving and Christmas. We'll share gifts as a family one last time. And, after Christmas, we'll tell the kids, we'll tell the family. And then in January, we're filing and we're moving on. So that's why we always do one in January. June is the other month because it's when the school year has ended.
Right.
And beginning into the summer and say, okay, school year's over. Let's announce it. Let's take the summer to try to figure this out as a family, and then before school starts again in the fall. So, yeah, that's why I encourage you to release this in January, because there'll be people who are just coming out of the holidays who are like, okay, time to file.
So, first of all, I really appreciate that, and that message that you just gave people, and again, if you're listening in, I always say you're listening for a reason. And so forgiveness, and by the way, whether you think you're getting divorced in January or not, forgiveness is one of the most powerful gifts that we could give ourselves and others. And if you didn't give it to somebody for Christmas, you ought to give it to them now. You ought to give it to yourself, because it is the most freeing thing that we can do for ourselves or others. It's ultimately letting ourselves or somebody off the hook. I would say this about forgiveness as we finish. I think a lot of people mistakenly think that forgiveness is excusing behavior. I would argue that it's the opposite. To acknowledge something needs to be forgiven is to acknowledge that it exists and that it's painful enough to be forgiven.
Absolutely.
The gracious intent of forgiveness isn't about excusing. It isn't about even the lack of consequences. But it is about freeing myself and another human from an unnatural and unhealthy bondage to a past event that then one never can really free themselves from.
That's right.
So really wisely put, Bill. And just thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming on the show. Again, if you're listening in, listeners, I always say you're listening in for a reason. So do me a favor. As you unpack this conversation, and it might be a more difficult one than normal that we would have on our show, I also hope that you find it unusually hopeful. But my encouragement to you would be, as you unpack this in your life, do me a favor, DM me or email me at tim@uncommodified.com and let me know how you're processing this conversation for your benefit or maybe for the benefit of others. Also, if you know somebody who's in this circumstance in their life right now, share this episode with them and connect them with Bill's organization and his team. And again, thank you so much for your time, Bill. Absolutely delightful and powerful and inspirational and gracious conversation. Cheers, everybody. Thanks. Have a wonderful day.